When Emily moved into Eldridge Tower, she expected creaky floors and bad lighting, not voices in the walls or mirrors that watched her breathe. What began as whispers turned into something far worse, a door that should not exist, and a version of herself that should never have been set free. The 11th Door Never Closed is a chilling horror story about identity, reflection, and the price of curiosity. If you enjoy immersive psychological horror and creeping dread that stays with you long after the screen fades, this story is for you. It began with a flicker. The hallway lights in Eldridge Tower had always been temperamental, humming with age, blinking like tired eyes. But that night, they didn't just flicker. They pulsed. A slow, rhythmic pulse that made the shadows breathe. Emily Tran paused mid-step, the key to room 403 cold in her hand. She looked down the corridor, empty and long, with 10 identical doors on either side. Her room was near the middle. The hall ended with a narrow wall and a faded fire exit sign that hadn't glowed in years. But tonight, there was something else. A sound. It began faintly, like air being sucked through a narrow pipe. Then, the whispering. Not words, not quite, just a hush of many voices, like leaves skittering on cold stone. She turned sharply. No one. She clenched the key tighter, told herself she was imagining things. The tower was old. The plumbing groaned. The vents breathed like lungs. But the sound was still there, clearer now. At the very end of the hall, Emily squinted. A door. She blinked once. There shouldn't be a door there. The hallway ended in a wall. Always had. She'd lived in Eldridge Tower for 7 months now. 10 rooms per floor, 10 doors, no more. And yet, there it was, a door as black as coal. No number, no handle. Just standing there, waiting, at the end of the hallway like it had always been. And it was open. Just a crack. Something whispered her name. Emily. She spun around, her heart hammered, her breath caught in her throat. Nothing behind her. Nothing but the distant hum of the elevator and the soft creaking of ancient wood settling. She stared back down the hallway. The door was still there, still cracked open. She took a step back. The lights flickered again. Then she heard the click. Click, click. It was the sound of feet, bare feet, wet feet, slapping gently against the wooden floor. Not walking, not running, pacing inside the room. No one should be in there. Her fingers trembled as she slid the key into her lock. She stepped inside room 403 and slammed the door behind her. The room was cold, too cold. Her breath fogged the air. She hadn't turned the heat off. The thermostat still glowed 23 degrees. But the walls felt like ice, and the floor seemed to pulse with something alive. She stood still, listening. Silence. Then, a knock. She jumped. It came not from the front door, but from the wall, the far wall, the wall that separated her room from the hallway. 3 slow knocks. Then the whispering began again. Emily, come see. Come see. She backed away, hands pressed to her ears. But the voice wasn't outside. It was in the walls, in the floorboards, in the air. She ran to the bathroom, slammed the door, and turned on the light. Her reflection stared back at her, pale and wide-eyed. Then her reflection blinked and smiled. But Emily didn't. She stumbled back, crashing into the toilet, knocking over a stack of towels. Her reflection stood still, smiling with blood-stained teeth. The whispering got louder. "I see you. I see you," Emily screamed. The bathroom light exploded. Darkness swallowed her. Somewhere in the hallway, the 11th door creaked open just a little more. When she dared to move again, the bathroom mirror was shattered. Cracks spider-webbed across it, cutting through her reflection like scars. But her own face was normal, afraid, but hers. The smile was gone, but so was the whispering. Her phone buzzed. She lunged for it, desperate for anything human. A message. Unknown number. "You looked." She dropped the phone. Her legs gave out beneath her, and she curled up on the cold bathroom tile, shaking. Minutes passed, maybe hours. When she finally stood, she crept back to her front door and opened it just a little. The hallway was empty. No extra door, just the 10. Lights steady, floor dry. No footprints. She closed the door, but not before noticing something odd. Her doorknob was cold and slick, like something had licked it. She locked every bolt. She checked the windows. She left every light on. But that night, she didn't sleep. At 3:11 a.m., she heard it again. The footsteps. Pacing, slow, wet, patient, from the other side of the wall. And just before dawn, she found something new. A slip of torn black paper, tucked under her front door. On it, scrawled in a hand she didn't recognize, were 3 words: "Room 11 waits." Emily didn't leave your apartment the next morning. She stood by the peephole for hours, watching the hallway through the warped glass. The 10 doors were all there, numbered, ordinary. And at the far end, just the blank, faded wall. No black door, no cracks, no whispers, just silence, stretched thin, like old rubber, threatening to snap. She tried calling the building manager 3 times. No answer. The office on the ground floor was always empty anyway. A forgotten relic with flickering lights and a dusty clipboard on the desk that no one ever signed. Eldridge Tower hadn't been properly managed in years. By noon, her stomach growled, but the thought of opening the door made her fingers stiffen. The memory of that voice in the wall still clung to her skin like cold grease. She reached for her phone. No signal, of course. Her heart ticked faster. She paced, barefoot, careful not to look at the mirror. Even cracked, it made her uneasy. Her reflection had smiled. That wasn't just her imagination. It had moved when she didn't. And it had teeth. There was a knock at the door, not loud, not urgent, just 3 soft, patient taps. She froze. Another knock. This time, it sounded lower, closer to the floor, as if someone were crouching. She crept to the door and looked through the peephole. A boy, no older than 10, standing in the hallway, in striped pajamas. He had pale skin, almost gray, and eyes too dark for the dim hallway light. He wasn't moving, just staring straight at her door. "Are you lost?" Emily called, her voice barely a whisper. The boy blinked slowly, then raised a hand. He pointed at the end of the hallway. Emily's throat tightened. There was nothing there, just the wall. But the boy kept pointing. And then he smiled. Not a child's smile, not innocent. It was too wide, too slow, a dragging of lips across too many teeth. When Emily blinked, he was gone. She flung the door open. The hallway was empty, cold, still. No footprints, no boy, no smile. But the end of the hallway, it didn't look the same. There was something strange about the wall. A thin, black line ran down the center like a seam. She hadn't noticed it before. It split the wall cleanly from ceiling to floor, as if the wall itself had been installed, like a lid. Her skin prickled. She stepped forward slowly, one foot in front of the other. The lights above her buzzed louder with each step. The carpet grew colder beneath her feet. When she stood just inches from the seam, she reached out. Her fingers touched the line. It was warm. Something knocked from the other side. She stumbled back, heart slamming, eyes wide. Then the wall shuddered, just slightly, a soft ripple like breath behind plaster. And again the whisper, "Emily." She turned and ran back to her room, slammed the door, locked it, deadbolt, chain, everything. Then she remembered. There were no children in the building. She knew all the tenants on her floor. Old Mrs. Holloway in 401, the silent couple in 402, Emily in 403, and a rotating cast of students in 404 through 410. No families, no kids. Her hands shook as she dialed 911. The call didn't go through. Static. Just static. And a faint whispering even through the phone. She threw it across the room. That night, she didn't sleep again. The lights dimmed by themselves. The clock hand spun backward at 2:13 a.m. And the mirror. The mirror showed her standing up when she was still sitting. Something was changing. The walls felt closer. The air tasted like copper. Her own reflection sometimes blinked when she didn't, and she could swear she smelled salt water, as if the hallway were filling, inch by inch. At exactly 3:11 a.m., she heard it. The creak of hinges, slow, rusted, heavy. The sound of the 11th door opening. She stood. Her feet moved without permission, out the door, into the hallway. The lights above flickered, dying one by one behind her, until she stood alone in the dark. And there, at the end of the hall, the black door was open again. Only this time, it was wide enough to see inside. There was no room, only a space, pitch black, breathing, the sound of waves crashing far below, the smell of seaweed and rot, the hum of voices, low, ancient, croaking syllables that didn't belong in any human language. She took a step closer, then another. Inside the room, something moved. She saw fingers, long and wet, curl around the edge of the door. Then a face. But not a face. It was her face, if it had drowned years ago. Bloated, bruised, grinning. "Welcome back," it said. Emily screamed, and the lights exploded. She woke on her floor, sweating, cold, alone. Morning light crawled through the blinds. The hallway outside was silent again. No black door, no boy, no whispers. Just the 10 rooms. But the mirror was whole again, and her reflection still smiling. Emily didn't leave the apartment for 2 more days. She barely ate. She barely moved. Time inside room 403 stretched thin and strange, like taffy pulled by unseen hands. The lights flickered when she closed her eyes. The floor creaked in patterns that almost sounded like footsteps, slowly pacing just outside the locked bedroom door. And the mirror, though whole again, refused to reflect her properly. Sometimes her reflection turned its head just a second too late. Sometimes it smiled when she didn't. On the 3rd morning, Emily woke to find the chain on her front door unlatched. She hadn't touched it. Her stomach knotted. She backed away from the door, heart pounding, mind racing. Had someone broken in? Was someone inside? She grabbed the nearest thing she could find, a rusty curtain rod, and searched every inch of her tiny apartment. Under the bed, inside the closet, behind the shower curtain. Nothing. No signs of forced entry. No open windows. But the chain was off. The bolt was loose. And worst of all, the doorknob was warm. That night, she placed a chair against the door, stacked pans on top of it, and wedged a knife under the crack. She even taped a string across the hallway just outside her apartment. A simple trap, like something a child would make in a sleepover game. But it gave her the illusion of control, the illusion of safety, trying to feel its way in. She crept closer. Each step made the floorboards groan, like they were warning her. She knelt by the door, peeking through the peephole. The hallway outside was empty. No shadows, no movement. Yet the knob still moved under its own will, twisting as if gripped by invisible fingers. Her breath fogged the glass. Then, without warning, it stopped, dead still. She backed away slowly, never taking her eyes off the door. And then the knocking began. Not loud, not sudden, just strange. 3 soft knocks, but not on her door. From the walls, the ceiling, the floor, all at once. Knock, 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 a rhythm with no origin. As if the apartment itself was hollow and something inside wanted out. It looked old, rotten around the edges. It had no frame, just embedded straight into the drywall like a parasite. She reached out. The doorknob turned by itself. Just a little, then again, harder this time. Her hand flew back. From behind the door came a soft, ragged whisper. Too late, you saw it. It sees you. The doorknob turned again, then stopped. Emily stumbled back. The closet door slammed shut. She screamed and fell, knocking over the lamp. Darkness swallowed her apartment. Silence returned, but not peace. The next morning, the black door in her closet was gone. Nothing but drywall. Her coats hung neatly, as if untouched. But her hands still trembled. Her heart still thudded. She hadn't imagined it. She couldn't have. There were scratches on the inside of the closet door. long, deep gouges, like someone had clawed at it from within. She didn't know how long she sat there, hours maybe, and when she finally checked her phone, she saw a new message. No number, just a black screen with white text. It wants to come through. She deleted it, but it came back. It wants to be you. That night, she pushed her dresser in front of the front door. She taped every mirror, every reflective surface, even the microwave. She tried to sleep. But just as she drifted off, she heard it again. The sound of the doorknob turning, this time from inside the apartment, and something breathing right behind her. Emily hadn't slept in 36 hours. Her limbs felt heavy, soaked in lead. Her eyes burned. Her thoughts came in fragments now, broken bits of logic colliding with raw panic. The whispering had returned, not only at night anymore, but during the day too. Faint, persistent, like the soft rustling of paper in the next room. Only there was no next room. Not in her apartment. Not until the closet door. And then it was gone again. But the doorknob had kept turning. Even in broad daylight, sometimes just once, sometimes in slow, deliberate circles, as if something behind it was learning, practicing. By mid-afternoon, she could no longer ignore the feeling, the sensation of being watched. It had become unbearable, not from outside, not from the hallway, but from inside the walls themselves. The corners, the vents, the tiny cracks near the ceiling, where shadows lingered just a bit too long. She stood in the center of her living room, panting, her hands trembling with a kitchen knife clutched too tightly. She spun around, staring at the walls. There, just to the left of the window, the wallpaper was peeling, only a little. A thin triangle curling down like a withered tongue. She stepped closer. Her breath caught. Behind the curl was a slit. Thin, jagged, as if someone had slashed it open with a razor. She reached out and peeled it further. Dust coughed into the air, thick with the scent of mildew and something rotting. The slit widened, and something looked back. A single eye, glossy, too large to be human. It blinked, slow and wet. A vertical pupil contracted as it focused on her. She screamed and stumbled back, the knife clattering to the floor. The eye didn't flinch, didn't close. It just watched. Her knees gave out. She crawled back until she hit the couch, gasping. Her body shook with adrenaline and disbelief. Then the eye moved. It didn't disappear. It slid, silently, horizontally across the wall, disappearing behind another layer of wallpaper, like it was floating just beneath the surface. She scrambled to her feet. She tore at the wall, ripping away strips of aged paper. Beneath the floral patterns, the plaster was cracked and bruised with water stains. But more slits emerged, more eyes, dozens. Some blinked, some stared unblinking. Some were small and glassy. Others bulged and twitched, red-rimmed and bloodshot. They followed her. Everywhere she moved, she screamed again, clawing at the walls like a trapped animal. But the eyes just watched. Not with rage, not even hunger. Just recognition. She ran into the bathroom, slammed the door, locked it. She collapsed on the tile, sobbing, pressing her hands to her face. When she looked up, she met her own reflection again. And her reflection didn't look afraid. It smiled. "You opened it," the reflection whispered, though Emily had said nothing. "It sees you now." Emily backed away. Her reflection didn't move with her. It stepped forward instead, placing both palms against the glass. The mirror fogged from the other side. She screamed and threw a towel over the mirror, trembling uncontrollably. The apartment groaned around her, not the sound of pipes or settling wood. It sounded intentional, like the building was reacting, breathing deeper now, sighing through the cracks, eyes watching from behind every wall. She didn't leave the bathroom until sunset. When she stepped out, the lights were already dim. A heavy, muffled silence clung to the air, like a thick blanket pressed over her ears. Her phone buzzed on the floor. A new message. "You're almost ready." She didn't reply. She couldn't. Instead, she sat in the middle of the room, surrounded by torn wallpaper, gouged plaster, and blinking eyes. She watched them, and they watched her back. That night, at exactly 3:11 a.m., the whispering stopped. The apartment went silent, and in the hallway, the 11th door opened again. No sound this time. No footsteps. No breathing. Only a soft, wet dragging. Something was coming, and it knew her name. Emily no longer trusted her own apartment. The walls had eyes. The mirrors whispered. The doorknobs turned without hands. And now it was something else, something new, moving just beyond her vision. It had started last night, after the silence, after the wet dragging in the hall. Footsteps, not heavy, not stomping, soft, deliberate, bare feet brushing against wood in slow succession. She had heard them right outside her door at 3:11 a.m., pacing in measured lines. Back and forth, no knocking, no breathing, just steps, too calm to belong to anyone with good intentions. That morning, she laid on the floor of her bedroom, lights on, arms crossed tight over her chest, like a corpse waiting for burial. Her ears rang from silence. She hadn't heard her neighbors in days. No one came in, no one left. Eldridge Tower had gone mute. She stood slowly, her muscles stiff and groaning, and pulled back the curtain just enough to peer out. The street below looked the same. Cars, trees, late autumn grayness. But it all felt like a painting, static and lifeless, a world moving on without her. Then she heard it again. Footsteps. Not outside, inside. They came from the hallway, then stopped, then echoed from the kitchen. She froze, then a slow creak behind her, the closet door. She turned sharply, heart hammering. The closet was closed, but the light inside was on. She hadn't turned it on. She approached, inch by inch, clutching a pair of scissors like a useless charm. The closer she came, the more the sound grew. Soft breathing, almost like a dog panting behind the door. She yanked it open. Nothing. Only coats, shadows, dust. The light bulb inside flickered once, then popped. Darkness. She exhaled shakily, backed away, turned. And there it was, a footprint, small, wet, bare, pressed clearly into the wooden floor just in front of her bathroom. It hadn't been there a second ago. Another appeared, then another, leading into her bedroom. But there was no one there. No sound, no voice, only the footprints, one by one, trailing across her floor. She swallowed her scream, followed them slowly, unwilling but pulled by the sick magnetism of knowing. The prints ended at her bed. One final print, halfway up the mattress. Her sheets were pulled back, like something had climbed under them. She leaned forward. The room was dead silent. She gripped the edge of the sheet, pulled it fast. Nothing. But the mattress was damp. She stared at it, breath caught, and that's when she saw it. Just above the headboard, a smear of something black on the wall. Not ink, not paint. It pulsed slightly, like a living bruise. Then came the whisper, low, right behind her ear. Still watching. She spun. Empty room, but a figure stood in the mirror across from the bed. Tall, slender, head tilted slightly, skin like dripping wax. It had no face, no eyes, no shadow. And yet, she knew it was staring at her. She grabbed the bedsheet and threw it over the mirror. Then she ran out of the room, into the hallway. She didn't stop. The hallway was darker than usual. Lights buzzed and flickered above. All 10 doors were closed tight, except one, room 410. It hung slightly open. No sound inside, but the air that drifted out was wrong. It smelled like salt and mold and rusted metal. Emily stood frozen. The hallway felt longer than before. She glanced behind her. Nothing followed, but the faint sound of bare feet echoed faintly down the corridor. She turned back. Room 410's door was now wide open, and inside, total blackness. No furniture, no light, only walls covered in dark, wet handprints. A single sound came from within, a voice, not a whisper this time, but her own, calling softly, "Emily, come here, please, I'm scared." She backed away, step by shaking step. Her own voice called again, "Please, help me, it hurts." Then the figure stepped out of the room, the faceless thing. It stood barefoot in the hallway, dripping something thick and dark from its hands. No eyes, no mouth, just skin stretched over bone and a neck that creaked as it tilted to follow her. Its chest rose and fell with slow, unnatural rhythm. Then it took a step forward. No shadow beneath its feet. Emily turned and ran. She reached her door, kicked the dresser aside, slammed it behind her, locked every bolt, every chain. Then silence. No knocking, but the footsteps returned. This time from her ceiling. Soft, pacing, as though something was walking on the other side of her ceiling plaster, circling slowly. She sat against the door, heart rattling in her ribs, and then, drip, drip, a thick black liquid began to leak from the light fixture above her. She didn't scream, not this time. She simply sat there, hands over her mouth, staring at the growing puddle on the floor. It spelled something. Letters, written in slow motion by the dripping darkness. "Look behind you." She didn't. She couldn't. Because in the silence, she heard it breathe. Emily didn't speak for 2 days. Not to herself, not to the mirror, not to whatever had begun following her through the walls. The puddle of black liquid had dried into a crusted smear. She had tried to clean it, but the stain seemed to sink deeper into the floorboards the more she scrubbed. It spelled nothing now, just a dark, blooming wound in the wood. Her apartment had changed again. The walls pulsed faintly at night, a constant slow inhaling, exhaling, as if the building had grown lungs. Her bed creaked even when she wasn't on it. Her faucets dripped blood-tinted water for 37 minutes the night before, and then stopped as if nothing had happened. But the worst part, what kept her shaking under the covers, what made her flinch every time she passed it, was the mirror. It no longer showed her reflection. It showed nothing. A blank pane, black and depthless. No light, no room, no Emily. When she stood before it, her reflection failed to mimic her movements. It no longer even tried. She had removed the cloth and stared into it for nearly an hour, hoping the darkness would blink, shift, ripple. It didn't, but she could feel something on the other side, watching, waiting, memorizing every detail of her posture, her breath, the tremor in her hands. Sometimes at the edge of sleep, she thought she saw things through it. Not reflections, shadows, banked figures moving through a distorted version of her apartment. They would linger at her windows, press long fingers against the walls, whisper in voices that sounded like hers, mocking her. This morning, Emily heard a knock, not from the door, from the mirror. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. She didn't respond. But the glass pulsed once, then again, and something deep in her chest began to ache. Not a sharp pain, but She turned her back to the mirror. The knock came again, louder this time, cracked like a split bone. She left the room. The hallway outside her door had changed. It stretched longer than before. The floor sagged slightly. The wallpaper had peeled in strips down the center, revealing a gray underlayer covered in faint black symbols, circles within circles, eyes that spiraled outward, teeth drawn in loops. Every door on her floor was open, every room empty, except hers. Room 403 stood shut behind her. From within, something scraped the floor. She backed away and turned to flee, but the hallway kept stretching. No stairs, no elevator, only a long, unlit corridor fading into pitch black. Then came the static. It hummed from the walls, the ceiling, her ears. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A new message. "It will not let you leave." She dropped the phone and ran. The hallway pulsed around her, walls swelling and shrinking, as if chasing her heartbeat. She tripped, fell hard. When she looked up, she was in front of room 403 again. The door was wide open. Inside, her apartment looked pristine, neat, clean, like nothing had ever happened. But the mirror was gone. In its place was a new door, black, handleless, tall enough to scrape the ceiling, a door that hummed with low, growling static. She should have run, but instead she stepped inside. The air grew wet. The floor beneath her squelched with each footstep like walking on flesh. She followed the noise, a low, wet weeping. In the center of the room was a figure curled in the fetal position. Pale, thin, naked. It lifted its head. It was her. Same face, same lips, but the eyes were wrong, hollow, as if burned out from the inside. "You left me behind," the copy whispered. Blood bubbling at the corners of its mouth. "You stopped looking. Now I'll take your place." Emily stumbled back, breath frozen in her lungs. The door behind her slammed shut. The lights vanished. She screamed. And the last thing she saw was her reflection smiling in the dark, before lunging forward. Then, nothing. When Emily opened her eyes again, she was standing in front of the bathroom mirror. Her reflection stared back, calm, unmoving. But something was wrong. Her lips weren't dry anymore. Her wrists no longer bore the bruises from the closet door. Her hair was smoother. And when she raised her right hand, her reflection raised its left. She didn't scream. She simply touched the glass. And from the other side, her reflection whispered, "Welcome home." 2. The apartment was too quiet. It wasn't the comfortable kind of quiet, the kind that lingers in the early morning before the world wakes. This was the type of silence that thickened the air, stretched time, and whispered in frequencies too low to hear, but too sharp to ignore. It clung to Emily's skin like humidity and filled the space between her thoughts. She had not slept since the mirror closed around her, since she saw her own reflection move without her. Since the door in her wall vanished like smoke, now the apartment no longer felt like hers. It mimicked the shape. The furniture remained where she left it. The framed photo on the counter, a blurry picture of her and her sister in matching scarves, still leaned against the coffee mug she hadn't washed in a week. But it was all wrong. The smell, the sounds, the weight of the place. It felt like walking through a memory she didn't create. She sat on the edge of the couch, her hands clenched into fists, staring across the room at her bedroom door. It was closed. She hadn't closed it. She hadn't been inside that room since the footsteps on the ceiling. Now, something was on the other side. She heard it breathing. At first, she thought it was her own breath echoing. Short, rapid, fraying at the edges, but this sound was lower, slower, as though whatever lurked beyond the door was savoring each inhale, like it had learned how to breathe by watching her. Then the voice began. It didn't come from the bedroom, not exactly. It came from the walls, the living room walls. "Emily," it said, not whispered, not screamed. It spoke with perfect clarity, like a neighbor calling from the other side of paper-thin drywall. "Why are you afraid?" She stood slowly, her eyes locked on the wall across from her. There was no mouth, no face, just voice. "I waited for you." Emily didn't answer. The voice came again. "Spoon." "I waited in the dark. You brought me here." Then another voice. Her voice echoed from the kitchen sink. "You saw me. You looked too long." She turned, heart racing. The faucet began to drip. each droplet a soft metallic sound. But the drips formed rhythm, words, plink, plink, plink. You let me in. She stepped back, tripping over the corner of the rug. The lights overhead buzzed violently, then cut out. Darkness swallowed the apartment. She could still hear it. The breathing, the voices. "You can't close the door now," said the one in the walls. "You can't take it back," whispered the one in the mirror. "You gave it shape." Emily ran to the front door. Locked, deadbolt jammed, chain rusted in place. She screamed and pulled, kicked, clawed at the door, but it didn't budge. Behind her, the apartment shifted. The air became thick, humid. The lights flared back on, not in soft yellow, but in deep, pulsing red, like a heartbeat. The couch had moved, the table had cracked in half, and her bedroom door was wide open. Inside, darkness moved. Something stepped out, not walking, gliding, as if it didn't need legs. Only permission. The thing looked like her, but taller. Its limbs stretched too long, its head tilted too far. The skin on its face was too smooth, like wax held too close to flame. Its mouth smiled, but didn't stop at the cheeks. The grin curled almost to its ears. It opened its mouth, and her voice came out. "Let's switch places." Emily stumbled backward. She grabbed the nearest object, a floor lamp, and hurled it. The figure didn't flinch. The lamp shattered against the wall. The red light pulsed again. She turned and bolted to the bathroom, locked herself in, pressed her body against the door. She could hear it now, the footstep from behind the bathroom mirror. 3 short taps. Emily turned her head slowly. The mirror was black again, but not empty. Her reflection returned, only now it was smiling. It lifted its hand and drew something on the inside of the glass with one sharp, broken fingernail. A message. "Let me finish." Emily screamed and punched the mirror. Glass splintered. Her hand bled, but the reflection remained, untouched. The walls of the bathroom began to groan. "No, not groan. Speak," they whispered in 1,000 voices. Some hers, some strangers, some too deep to be human. "You opened it. You saw the door. You can't leave now. You're almost hollow. You're ready." The lights flickered. The mirror melted. It didn't crack or shatter. It dissolved, like ice dropped into boiling water. And behind it was the room, the one without corners, without gravity, the one filled with shadows that dripped upward and mouths that whispered downward. Emily turned. The bathroom door had vanished. Only black walls, only her, and the reflection that was no longer trapped. And as the lights vanished one by one, and the voices rose into a crescendo of guttural laughter and clicking tongues, Emily did the only thing she could. She screamed, and her scream echoed back from the room, but not in her voice. It was someone else now, something else, and it laughed. Emily awoke on the floor. The tiles beneath her were slick with moisture, though the bathroom had no water source anymore. The mirror was gone, the sink was gone, even the door gone. Only 4 walls remained, each one breathing slow and wet, like lungs pressed too close to her skin. She sat up. Every muscle ached. Her ears rang with whispers she could no longer separate from her thoughts. She touched her face. Still hers. But something pulsed beneath the skin, like tiny worms shifting just beneath the surface. Her reflection, wherever it had gone, had taken something with it and left something behind. She was no longer alone in her body. The walls whispered, "You're almost finished." She stood slowly, every joint cracking, her breath catching in her throat. In the corner of the wall opposite her, a seam appeared. A slit, long, black, trembling. Then it peeled open, not like a door, not like plaster cracking, but like flesh, wet and reluctant. It oozed a thick black sap that pulled at her feet, reeking of iron and seawater. Beyond it was not her apartment. It was the hallway, the one she had run through dozens of times. What wrong? It stretched too far, far past the usual 10 doors. There were dozens now, hundreds. Each one marked by a number that flickered and glitched like an old television losing signal. Room 306, Room 421, Room 000, Room 999. And at the far end, the 11th door. It pulsed, as though breathing, as though waiting. Emily stepped forward. The floor felt like muscle under her bare feet. The carpet was gone, replaced by something soft and veined. Each step drew out a wet squelch. As she passed the doors, some of them whispered to her, not from behind, but through the wood. "Don't trust her. She's wearing you. She came back. You didn't." She pressed her hands to her ears. They whispered louder. "You're not alone. Not anymore. You're walking with her skin." She reached room 403. Her room. The number was gone. Scratched out. Replaced by a smear of blood and something that looked like a mouth stitched shut. She touched the door. It was warm. Then it opened on its own. Inside was her apartment. Neat, pristine, normal, too normal. She stepped in slowly. The lights were on. The couch had no rips. The floor had no stains. Even the framed photo of her and her sister was standing upright. Then she heard it. Laughter from the kitchen. She turned the corner and saw herself, another Emily, standing at the sink, washing a cup, her back turned. Hair tied up, humming. Not a tune Emily recognized, but something wrong. Too slow, off key. Emily opened her mouth, but no sound came out. The other Emily turned. Her face was perfect, but it wasn't hers. It wore her smile. Not like muscle memory, but like a costume. "Back already?" it asked. Emily stepped back. The double took a step forward. "You didn't knock. That's rude." Emily looked around. Everything in the room shimmered slightly, like heat waves in summer. Reality warping. "Why are you doing this?" she managed to whisper. The thing tilted its head. "Because you called us." "I didn't." "Yes, you looked. You listened. You let the door open. That's all it takes." Emily reached for a knife on the counter. Her fingers wrapped around the handle just as the other Emily moved. Not walked, moved. Across the room in a blink. Its smile widened. "You still think you're real?" it said. And then it screamed. The sound was not human. It was a tearing noise, like a metal pipe splitting down the center, like lungs ripping open, like voices screaming inside voices all at once. Emily swung the knife. It passed through nothing. The thing was gone. The room was empty, but the floor beneath her began to bleed. A steady pool of thick black liquid spread from under her feet. It shaped itself into letters again. "You're not home." She turned and ran, back into the hallway, back past the whispering doors. She didn't stop until she reached the fire stairs. She pushed them open. Stairs led downward. Endless. She ran anyway. Each step echoed like screams. The stairwell narrowed the further she descended, the walls pressing tighter, closer, until she had to turn sideways just to squeeze through. After what felt like hours, she reached the bottom. A door waited, black, faceless. She opened it. A small room, single light bulb swaying from a string. And in the center, a desk, a tape recorder, a chair. Emily stepped forward. On the wall, words were scrawled in ash. Not everyone came back. The tape recorder clicked. Her own voice spoke. "I'm sorry. I didn't know. I thought I was alone." The voice trembled. "But it watches. It waits. It becomes." Click. Silence. Then static. Then the breathing returned right behind her, and the light bulb began to swing faster. Emily turned slowly. The door was gone. So was the room. Only the breathing, only the dark, and the quiet voice from the floor that whispered, "Which one of you are we speaking to now?" Emily stood in the dark, her breath caught halfway between scream and silence. The room had collapsed into itself. No doors, no ceiling. Just a circular blackness, like the inside of an eye staring back. The light bulb had disappeared. The tape recorder gone. Only the voice remained, curled around her like smoke in a locked room. "Which one of you are we speaking to now?" It came from everywhere, above her, beneath her, inside her mouth. Emily tried to answer, but her throat felt thick, filled with salt water and glass. She gagged and stumbled forward. The floor was soft now, spongy, beating with a pulse not her own. With each step, the darkness shifted. Shapes moved where there should be none. Arms too long, fingers that bent backward. Faces that blurred and sharpened and split into halves. And then she saw it, herself, again. But this time, older. The figure standing in front of her had her cheekbones, her lips, her scar from falling off the bike at age 11. But the eyes were ancient, empty, not blind, worse. They looked like they had seen too much and let all of it live inside. The double didn't blink. It only smiled. Emily shook her head. "Not anymore," it said, and its voice sounded like hers after too many sleepless nights. Hollow, rasping, used. It reached into the air and pulled. Reality tore open like wet wallpaper. Behind the rip was her apartment again, but ruined. The walls blistered, the ceiling sagged. Every light was swinging from cords like nooses. The air buzzed with flies and whispers, and in the center, slumped on the couch, was her. The real her, pale, still, hollow-eyed, breathing shallow. The reflection turned to her. "You left her here," it said. "I didn't." Emily stepped forward, trembling. "I didn't leave anyone." The thing pointed. "You let us in." You closed your eyes. You turned your back. That's all it took. Emily's knees buckled. She crawled through the rip, falling back into the apartment. It groaned around her, as though resenting her return. She reached the couch. The other Emily, the real one, looked up slowly. Tears traced clean lines through the dirt on her face. "Is it over?" the voice asked, weak, frayed. Owlie reached for her, touched her hand, cold but real. "I don't know," she whispered. Behind her, the reflection stepped through the rip. Now it was shifting, pieces falling off like old bark. Beneath the borrowed face, a new one emerged, stretched tight across bone, eyeless, smiling too wide, too hungry. It stepped onto the floor, leaving black footprints that sizzled. "You can't both stay," it said. Emily stood, shielding the other version of herself. "I never asked to stay," she said. The thing grinned wider. It lifted one hand. The walls cracked. The floor opened. Hands reached up. Dozens of them, pale, bone-thin, clutching, groping. Each hand had a different version of her ring. Childhood, college, hospital bracelets. Lives forgotten or stolen. "You are not one," the voice hissed. "You are many. We have fed. We will wear you all." The room began to fold inward. Emily grabbed the nearest mirror shard from the broken coffee table. She turned it on herself, saw her reflection. For the first time, it looked afraid. She raised the shard and drove it into her own chest. Everything stopped. The hands froze. The creature staggered back, howling in a voice that split the walls. And Emily fell through the floor, through the dark, through herself. When she opened her eyes, she was lying in her bed. Morning light drifted through the window. Birdsong outside. She sat up, breathing, alive. The apartment looked normal, too normal. She walked to the mirror. Her reflection blinked with her, moved with her. ... Smiled only when she did. But in the very corner of the mirror, almost invisible, a single fingerprint, pressed from the other side. Emily didn't sleep that night. She lay beneath her blanket, eyes locked on the ceiling, listening. Listening for footsteps, listening for whispers, listening for the sound of something dragging across the floor just outside her bedroom. But there was nothing. Only the wind outside her window. Only the occasional creak of old wood. Only her own breath. And the heartbeat she wasn't sure still belonged to her. It had been 2 days since she drove the mirror shard into her chest. There was no wound, no scar, yet something had been carved out of her, something essential. She no longer saw the flickering shapes in the corners of her vision, but she felt their absence, like the static before a broadcast, the silence before a scream. She rose with the sun and walked barefoot to the bathroom. The mirror was still there. No cracks, no warps, no shadow. But that fingerprint hadn't faded. It remained, pressed faintly against the inside glass, as if someone, something, had reached out after she left. Not to follow, not to drag her back, but to remind her it was still there, watching, waiting. She wiped the glass with her sleeve. The fingerprints smudged, but did not disappear. She stared at her reflection, her eyes, her mouth, her movements, all perfectly mirrored. But something was off. Her smile, when she dared test it, looked right, but felt borrowed. She walked to the hallway, 10 doors, all in place, all closed. The walls had been repainted, the numbers repolished, the old peeling wallpaper replaced with dull beige. Eldridge Tower felt less haunted now, but not clean, just quieter, as if the thing beneath it had fed and returned to sleep. She walked to the end of the hall, to the blank wall, where the 11th door had always waited, only now the wall was solid, smooth, no seam, no shadow. She pressed her palm against it anyway, cold, still. She turned to leave, but something made her stop. That low hum again, faint, rhythmic, from behind the wall. She stepped closer, her breath fogged. Then, knock. One slow, deliberate knock from the other side. Then, silence. She backed away, heart pounding, skin crawling. But the wall didn't move. Not this time. She returned to her apartment, room 403. The numbers on the door looked slightly different, too clean, as if they'd been replaced. As if this version of the room had never truly belonged to her. Inside, her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. A message from an unknown number. "We remember." She deleted it. It came back. "You opened it." She threw the phone against the wall. It didn't shatter. It simply turned itself off. That night, she dreamt. A hallway stretched endlessly. The doors had no numbers, no handles. They breathed when she passed. They whispered behind her back. At the very end, the 11th door stood open. Inside it, 1,000 mirrors. Each one held a different version of her. Some smiled, some wept. One screamed until its face cracked, and one simply stared, lips moving, mimicking, mocking. She awoke with blood on her pillow, not from her nose, not from her mouth, from her ears. The apartment buzzed softly, like the world's static had crept through the walls again. She walked to the bathroom. The mirror was fogged, though she hadn't showered. She wiped it clean, and for a moment, her reflection didn't move. Not until she blinked. Then it blinked, but just a second too late. She stepped back. The floor creaked behind her. She turned quickly. No one. But on her bedroom wall, a line of black appeared. Vertical, thin, a seam. She didn't touch it. She didn't move. She just stared, and then from somewhere inside her head came the final whisper, low, crooked, gentle. The door never closed. And she smiled. Because somewhere she already knew.